Hello, I'm Jim Cornell, and this is Base to Base, the weekly biotech podcast from Air Coastal Media. Yes, welcome again to the Base to Base Biotech podcast, and this is number 23, going out on August the 22nd, the birthday of two composers, Debussy and Stockhausen. And it's Folklore Day, and it's Tooth Fairy Day, which means we have a podcast about teeth. Well, actually, no, we don't. The Tooth Fairy turned down my interview request. Not a lot to report from the last week other than it's still warm in Scotland and the kids are back in school. Second day back, my son went on a trip. The funny thing was it was to the Edinburgh Festival to meet an author, and that's something he can do just by going into my office, seeing as I've had 9 books published so far with a 10th due next month. It's not on biotech though. But obviously that doesn't qualify me as being an author as far as the school is concerned. Not that I'm bitter, just confused, as I am most days. If you do have news or suggestions for who should be on the podcast, or a book I should write to look cool to my son, or indeed any other suggestions or comments, please do get in touch at jim@deeptechdigest.com, which is also the address you can use if you're interested in advertising with us or sponsoring a podcast episode. Last week our conversations were about peanut allergies with Maita Agueros, CEO and co-founder of InnoUp Pharma, and with Judith Cressier, CEO of Pulse Sight Therapeutics, about new treatments for dry AMD. This week it's Fibrobiologics CEO Pete O'Heeron about fibroblast spheroid technology, and a wide-ranging conversation with Anna Codina, Senior Director, Strategy and Business Development at SciY, as we discuss artificial intelligence, digitalisation, and the effect on labs, among other things. First, let's take a quick look at some of the news you may have missed over the past week at deeptechdigest.com. Chronicle Bio is aiming to accelerate breakthroughs for millions living with complex chronic conditions. A nice tongue twister to start with. ThinkBio.ai and UST are partnering to help biopharma and healthcare, and researchers have re-engineered an AI language model to target previously undruggable disease proteins. There have been positive Phase 2 results from a Stargardt disease study. A novel gene therapy for ALS has been cleared for trials in the US and China, and the FDA has cleared a CAR-T cell therapy treatment for refractory systemic lupus erythematosus. Zifo has launched an AI antibody engineering app to aid drug discovery. Sapient has published a study revealing a metabolic aging clock and disease insights, and a new Rett syndrome treatment has been described as pivotal. Mabwell's ADC targeting CDH17 has received IND clearance, and you can read all of these and many more that I couldn't pronounce at deeptechdigest.com. So let's move on to the first of this week's conversations. It's with Fibrobiologics CEO Pete O'Heeron, who can tell us all about fibroblast spheroid technology. And I have to say I'm impressed, and I hope you will be too. Pete, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. And I'd like to start with a bit of background on the company.
Sure. Fibrobiologics is a regenerative medicine company. We use fibroblasts, which are the most common cell in the human body, to regenerate tissue, cure chronic disease. It's similar to stem cells, only it's, from our research, appears to be more stable than stem cells, has a higher therapeutic value. So we've really kind of put everything we have behind fibroblasts. There's really 2 cells you can use in the human body. You can use a stem cell, or you're going to use a fibroblast. And that fibroblast market is kind of the space that we're in. And with respect to stem cells, this appears to be a better platform for what we found. So we use it for the same purposes that they use stem cells for, kind of regeneration and regrowth of tissues.
I guess most people would know what stem cells are, or at least have heard the term, but fibroblasts is a little bit more unknown, I guess. What are fibroblasts and what's their role in treatment?
Well, fibroblasts are the cells that make up the extracellular matrix. They kind of hold the body together. And the irony, when we talk about stem cells, because they won the Nobel Prize in 2012, Dr. Yamanaka won that in Japan for creating the first induced pluripotent stem cell. That is, to take one cell, turn it into another type of cell. The irony of that is they use a fibroblast to do that. So literally our cell began the entire stem cell revolution. Most of our fibroblasts come from skin cells. So if you can take a dermal punch about the size of a number 2 pencil eraser, and from that you can literally regrow almost the entire human body. So they're very powerful cells in huge quantities.
And how do they improve on existing treatments and other cell therapies?
The main thing for what we've seen is that they're a more stable platform. Kind of the analogy I use is that stem cells want to be anything other than what they are. They want to turn into any other type of cell. Fibroblasts are fully differentiated. They're at the end of their cycle, yet they can be coaxed to become another cell. With that, it gives you an inherently more stable platform than stem cells. And I think we just saw the first stem cell treatment approved by the FDA with mesoblast and their graft versus host disease. You'll see those coming up, those types of approvals coming up for fibroblasts. We just view it as a much more stable platform than stem cells.
Are there any other advantages to using them?
Well, they're in much greater quantity. They're easier to harvest than stem cells. They're easier to grow. They're easier to ship. A higher percentage of them stay alive when you give them to another individual. We use allogenic, which is from one donor to another. So they appear to be immune privileged, meaning your fibroblasts work in my body just as well as my own fibroblasts. So that gives us an opportunity to make these products off the shelf. That is one encounter. You go in, you get your diagnosis, you pull these fibroblasts off the shelf, and you get your treatment at the same time. Some of the stem cell programs use autologous, which is from the individual themselves, and it takes some time to scale them up, and then you have to get the treatment down the road. This is an entirely different kind of a one-session treatment, diagnosis and treatment.
Does that have cost implications?
Tremendous. I think one of the things you've seen, one of the drawbacks on stem cells, and I think that will get better, by the way. I think that as we scale up over time, costs will come down. I think one of the things we've seen is that the cost for cell therapy has been so high, it's had trouble getting through the approval process. And then when you get to the other side of that, the cost of that treatment is extraordinarily high. Fibroblasts will bring that down by a multiple factor. Fibroblasts are just easier to harvest, easier to grow. Everything about them is an easier process, so it tends to reduce the cost tremendously.
And what is your SciY 628?
Sure, that's our wound care product. So that's our first in human trial coming up very soon. What we do with that is we're treating diabetic foot ulcers. I mentioned to you before that we're pulling fibroblasts from skin tissue. Fibroblasts are the first cells and the critical to wound healing. So one of our first indications is diabetic foot ulcers, which are very difficult to heal. What we do is we use fibroblast spheroids. Those are the way we grow them. They're kind of a droplet of fibroblasts. So you get about 3,000 fibroblasts per droplet. We put that on that open wound, and it tends to migrate into the wound, release cytokines and growth factors on a very predictable biologic time release. I call it kind of like Alka-Seltzer. It just dissolves into the wound. What we get for that versus stem cells, and you'll probably hear my comparison with stem cells over and over in this discussion because that's who we compare against. That's what everybody compares us against, the stem cells. So what you get with these fibroblast spheroids is you get more time on target. And so you get the treatment lasts longer on that. What we've seen versus in our animal trials versus the number one product on the market, which is Graphics by Smith and Nephew, is that we can heal in about half the time of the top product on the market. So it's very exciting what we've seen in animals.
It seems like you're working in quite a lot of different areas. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about some of them and what you're hoping to achieve for patients.
Sure. One of the other areas we're in is multiple sclerosis. We've done a small 5-patient safety trial on that. happy to report there were no adverse events related to that, to a fibroblast. What we saw it in all 5 patients. We stopped the progression of multiple sclerosis. So very exciting work. We have our pre-IND work will be completed on that this year. We have an IND clearance on degenerative disc disease. So we have some really great animal data on that, and we're looking forward to getting that into humans. We also have a pre-IND candidate in psoriasis, which most people think of that as a skin disorder, and that's how it manifests itself, but it's really an immune issue. And so fibroblasts have a nice impact on that. We're beginning our early work in cancer. And then one of our more exciting programs is our thymic involution program. It's our human longevity program. As you age, the thymus gland, which is the teaching center for the immune system, begins to shut down. So we don't have more cancer at 70 than we have at 40. It's just that our immune system stops teaching what are the good cells, what are the bad cells. By the time you get into your 60s and 70s, your thymus gland has essentially shut down. We have been able to create organoids, which are small collection of cells that function like the larger organ. And we've put those under the skin, sub-Q in animals, and we've held them in place for over 65 days, producing T cells. We've also had them held in place to simulate the pancreas and excreting insulin for that same time period. So it's very exciting. We may not be replacing the full organ, but what we may be doing is replacing them with organoids based on your thymic function level. We'll be able to put an organoid under the skin. The exciting thing of what we saw with those organoids is that it also vascularized to that organoid. So the animal trials showed that their body wanted to give it nutrients, wanted to give it oxygen, so it vascularized to that organoid. So that very exciting work is coming up on that.
Are there many other companies working on this kind of thing?
Jim, we haven't found any other companies working on fibroblasts. We have more intellectual property. We have over 275 patents issued and pending in this space. It's more IP than the rest of the world combined. So we have not found another company using fibroblasts therapeutically.
You kind of mentioned your upcoming clinical trial. I wonder if you could tell me a bit about the trial for diabetic foot ulcers.
It's a 120-patient trial. It will be based in Australia. It should begin very, very soon. We've chosen our locations, and we are in the process of getting our master cell bank completed, shipped over. Well, it is completed, but we're getting the manufactured product shipped over there. So I think you'll see some news coming out on that very soon.
Excellent. What are you looking for in terms of what you would consider to be success for both you and for patients within this trial?
It's a great question. We want two things. The main thing is we want to heal sooner than what the existing treatments have. So we want to speed up the healing process. And since fibroblasts are integral to the healing process of the skin, we think that we'll be successful with that. The other one is that the quality of the healing. We think that we can actually end up with a better quality healing process, which in some senses you might see a reoccurrence of that wound. We don't want to see a reoccurrence of the wound. We want it to be a complete healing. So those are really the two things we're looking at: speeding up the healing process and also the quality of that healing.
Right, because I mean, one of the things with diabetic foot ulcers is there's a lot of potential for complications, but if you're healing, then I guess there are no complications. It's going to be good all around.
It is, and they're very difficult. My own grandfather lost both of his legs to diabetic foot ulcers, so I've seen firsthand how that can happen and how that can get away from them. They get the diabetic foot ulcer. Vascularization is lower in that area for diabetic patients. Their sense of the wound or the feeling of the wound is less, so we can kind of get away from them. And if we can go in there and be successful, I think we can. I've been in healthcare since the early 90s, and this issue of diabetic foot ulcers and chronic wounds has been around a very long time. They've been looking for that complete solution. To me, fibroblasts can offer that solution.
Do you have any other clinical trials planned?
Well, we have IND clearance for degenerative disc disease, so we'll be meeting with the FDA on that here in the near future. Then we will be filing our IND for multiple sclerosis this year, and also you should see an IND for psoriasis this year as well. We'll have an active 2025 and a very active 2026.
You said that nobody else is working in this area, and you have, I guess it was close to what, 300 patents. What do you see as the future for fibroblasts in medicine?
I think it'll be the leader for regenerative medicine. I think that when you see it compared against stem cells, at least in our lab work, we've beat stem cells in every comparison. I think that it'll be the leader. People ask me sometimes, well, if it's so good, why haven't we heard about fibroblasts? Our theory on that is when you won the Nobel Prize for induced pluripotent stem cells, the market goes in that direction. You probably saw the 20, 30 companies form around stem cells. After that, you saw the Nobel Prize for immunotherapy for cancer. Dr. Jim Allison in Houston won for that. And you saw a number of companies started up for immunotherapy for cancer. And then most recently, you saw Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuelle Charpentier win for CRISPR. And you saw a number of companies starting with that technology. So our theory is the reason you don't know about fibroblasts is because stem cells won the Nobel Prize in 2012. And everybody kind of gave that all the oxygen, which allowed us kind of an open road to go out and create and develop some really strong IP in that area.
So when do you get the Nobel Prize for fibroblasts then?
I tell my chief scientific officer I can't wait to go. And I think it will be not for any one indication, but maybe for a body of work would be great for him to get his recognition. I know he would probably say his team deserves it as well, but that would be wonderful to get that kind of recognition.
What do you anticipate working on in the short and long term? Again, because you've got all of those patents and you've got so many areas that you can work in. What's the plan?
Yeah, Jim, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, was there any more areas that we could file additional intellectual property in fibroblasts, I would have said, I'm not sure. Since that time, I think we've filed 55 patents plus since that time period. So as we are developing our therapeutics, we're also developing unique ways to manufacture. And so I think you're going to see some of that migrating over into the manufacturing area because everything we do has never been done before. And so the trays that we hold these in, the trays that we grow these in, the trays that we ship these in, all of those items have to be invented for the first time. So it's kind of like Tesla. You had to invent the battery specific for Tesla. You had to invent the body specific for Tesla, and then the assembly line specific for that. So I tell our people all the time, every step we take is like walking on Mars. It's a footstep that nobody's taken before. And so that's really exciting. And, we're open to therapeutic opportunities and also efficiencies in manufacturing. I think it's very important.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask you, is scaling up going to be an issue?
It's not. These are such a stable platform. And what we've really focused on in the manufacturing is making sure that the trays we grow them on and what we ship them in all can be scaled up. And being the most common cell in the human body, they are easily scaled up. I think if you talk to people, and when we do talk to people in stem cells, we talk about the instability of that cell type. We've yet to have anyone correct us. I think they all kind of shake their head. Yes, it's a very difficult cell to work with. A powerful cell. I mean, stem cells are powerful. They do everything they say that they're going to do. They're just a more difficult one to work with. And so I think that ours gives us tremendous scalability options. It should lower the cost of cell therapy.
Are you working with partners or looking for partners?
Yeah, we're open to collaborations with anyone who might be interested. I have a meeting this afternoon with one group that wants to talk about a collaboration. So yeah, I think we're interested. I think one of the hurdles for that, Jim, is getting people to understand the therapeutic value of fibroblasts. We literally presented to a professor of dermatology at a medical school about a month ago. He teaches fibroblasts. At the end of the conversation with myself and our CSO, he said, guys, I didn't even know this was possible, and I teach fibroblasts every single day. So if the people that are teaching fibroblasts didn't know about the therapeutic value that they bring, the rest of the world obviously doesn't know. So I think one of our challenges is to continue to be out there as a messenger for what these fantastic cells can do. I like to say that we evolved with them being the most common cell in the human body because they're involved in every biologic process that we've found.
Is there anything else that you wanted to mention in the couple of minutes we have left?
No, I appreciate it, and we just ask the listeners to go to our website at fibrobiologics.com and keep track of our clinical trials. We also have them loaded on clinicaltrials.gov, so watch the progress, and hopefully we will bring cures and remedies for some of these worst chronic diseases.
Excellent news. Seems like a very exciting thing to be in. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are kind of doing really good stuff and extending life by, I don't know, 6 months to a year, but it seems like you've got a real potential to make a massive difference.
I would just say on our human longevity program, the other ones that I've seen, which are include telomere extension and genetic modification and maybe some calorie restriction. Those will ultimately probably extend life, but what life are you extending? Because you're still going to be sick. What fibroblasts can do with the increase in thymic function using our organoid is to not only extend your life but keep you healthy. You're not keeping a sick person alive longer. You're creating a healthy environment for that person to live longer. So I think ours is unique in that it's a systemic approach.
So now you know what fibroblast spheroid technology is. I really enjoyed that one. Groundbreaking is a word used far too often, but if that is the future of regenerative medicine, as Pete says in the interview, then it's great news all round. I enjoyed the next conversation too, which was a lot of fun and a lot of great information on not just AI, but the digitalisation of labs and many other aspects of using data. I hope you find the conversation as informative and useful as I did. We talked with Anna Codina, Senior Director Strategy and Business Development at SciY. Hi Anna, thanks for being with us today, and as I'm a creature of habit when it comes to the first question, could you tell us a bit about the company?
Yes, sure. SciY is a division within Bruker. Bruker is a much bigger company and decided a few years ago that was time to pivot more towards software. We were born as a hardware company delivering scientific instrumentation, but it was time to be recognized also in the software space. And to do this rapidly, what we did is a series of strategic mergers and acquisitions that allow us to position in the software space as well and digitalization space. And some of these companies were Mestre Labs, for example. Then we went Arspan, and we also Zontal and Logs to a position, and also process analytical technology software companies, optimal industrial automation and optimal industrial technologies. At that time, once we've done these acquisitions, we had a critical mass then to form digitalization and automation division, and we call it SciY. And why we call it a different name is to differentiate ourselves from Bruker, because we keep being vendor agnostic. So we can help Bruker, but we help everybody else. So we deal with other vendors like Agilent and Waters and anybody really, because one of the missions that we have is to help companies in their digitalization and automation AI readiness journey. And to be able to do this, we have to be truly agnostics and really fit on what the customer needs and the user wants. The name is something that we have discussion about as well because of the why. So the why is because of curiosity. Why? And the scientific curiosity, but not only that, but also the why that we put in equations that relate us to science, mathematics, and physics, which is very important in our field.
All right, very good. So what kind of assistance do you or are you able to give to biotech and pharma companies?
We have a wide range of portfolio solutions. Our main mission is to help them with digitalizing. What does this mean? So now we hear a lot about AI and the impact of AI in many companies, life science, but also material sciences, applied industry. Now, to be able to use AI, there is work to do before that, because we are living in a situation that we could describe sometimes the data mess, where we have data that is in silos, that have different formats, that perhaps these formats are proprietary and that are difficult to access. So we spend more time preparing the data for AI than actually the AI itself. what SciY does is help customers and remove this burden. We do it for the customer. What we do is ingest data from instrumentation in the lab, but also robotics. We ingest from repositories, from databases, and make this data neutral. And we enrich it with metadata, and we make it available in a format that can be reutilized, and we can do then dashboards with Power BI or the systems. We can then do AI. This data can be then interpreted by the humans and machines now and in the future, because we have enough data and metadata to be able to understand this data today and in the future. Apart from that, we are experts in data and knowledge extraction. What do I mean? We've been spending more than 20 years interpreting spectroscopy data. We are lab scientists. We have data scientists, of course, in our company, but also we are lab scientists. We used to be the customer. We used to be there doing the experiments, and we know how important it is to relate, to put foot on the ground and to relate what happens in the lab to what happens in the space of the cloud and the data space. So for us, we understand these layers in between. To be able to do AI, we need to understand this data. We need to be able to extract in a way that it can be reusable, that we really know the insights that it contains, and it's not just raw data dumped in a data lake.
What kind of effects are AI and digitalization having in labs?
It's really a revolution, and I don't like this word, but it is. I always ask evolution or revolution, and I feel it is a revolution. It's changing completely the way that we work, and at a pace that not even the creators of AI expected that we go that fast. It's actually scary. For a person like me, that I'm a lab scientist, it is a point where you wonder, are we going to have a job? Because AI is evolving so rapidly and impacting drug development, drug discovery, and manufacturing. What happened now is that it's not just hype. We start seeing the results of implementation of AI in pharmaceutical and other industries. We have examples that are really striking. For example, the other day, Novo Nordisk published that they are able to compile regulatory documentation and reduce the time it took from 12 weeks to 10 minutes. And very, very revolutionary. And also other companies that in silico medicines or Xentia that are producing drug candidates in few months, that it's never been seen before. So we are now in the middle of a revolution. And the impact is massive. We have to believe, though, that not everything is AI, and the scientists are also very important in this transformation.
Is it having any effects on staff? And I'm thinking right through from the bottom through to CEOs at the top. And I would imagine that there are maybe positives and negatives involved.
Sure. We see a transition from experiments, from being in the lab, so from lab experiments to in silico experiments, what we call the dry lab, and more in silico. Why? Because it's cheaper, reduced footprint, and reduced time to market. So it has advantages, and it's happening. So that, okay, do we still need instruments? Because for a company like ours, of course, this is very important. We do need instruments, because the instruments then become not just for the purpose of try and error experimentation, but also validating these algorithms that we are using AI and for predictions. We need to validate this data. And again, I'm coming back to have a foot on the ground. It is very important that what we're doing is the right thing, because if you put junk in, junk out. So then we use instrumentation, and for a while we will be using instrumentation, of course, but also the scientists. Then we don't want to replace the scientists. The scientists are very important. We want to augment them and to remove the routine tasks so that they can focus on what really matters and what their expertise are needed. Remove the routine and focus on the science. So they are augmented to more strategic positions and decision making. And we learn from workshops that we have done in the past, one in Basel about autonomous labs, that there are many tasks that cannot yet be automated and that we still have a long way to go.
I was interested in what you said close to the beginning there about the fact that this is what you have done in the past and that you understand it. How important do you think it is? Because it's very similar in writing and the media, is that if you're doing something as a media person and you flip into a different position, like in PR, you have that experience on both sides, whereas a lot of people don't have that. I was interested in what you said because it clearly that's something that you understand the whole picture.
Certainly, and I feel that when we talk to the users directly, they appreciate it. Sometimes they say, oh, I like that. Instead of sending just slides with boxes, you are talking about experiments. And I do believe that they feel a bit relief that we speak the same language. Then, of course, we do have the experts in each of the fields to go deeper, but it is very important that we understand what they want to do.
And how is the gathering and the use of data evolving and the amount of data, I guess?
Yes, the amount of data that we generate, the scientists, it is amazing nowadays. So I've heard the other day in another podcast that we're generating 1 million times more data than we did 40 years ago. And then the question is, what do we do with the data? I remember once in the lab also, I had such a good instrument that I was able to generate more data that I could look at. So then we create bottlenecks elsewhere. We do have all this data. First of all, quality of data, it is very important. So it is very important to have a strong data strategy that allows for quality, but also to capture this data in a way that the scientists don't need to worry about it. The processes need to happen in the background without interrupting what they're doing. We are able to capture this data automatically from the different enterprise systems and LIMS, ELNs, instruments in a very, very agnostic way, very automatic way, so that processes are not disturbed. This is evolving towards a situation where the data is not just raw data, as I was explaining, but it has metadata about the context. Why is this data being acquired now? Under which conditions, even environment, and what process does this belong to? Can we differentiate it from the data that that person acquired to another lab person acquired? All this metadata is very, very critical for being able to interrogate the data today and in the future. So this is changing dramatically, and we're happy to be part of this change.
I think there's some instances of people thinking that you just introduce AI to a company and off you go, and it just starts as soon as you decide to use AI. But there are, I would imagine, a lot of companies that maybe don't have the infrastructure. Is there a limit to AI within environments that weren't built for it, or do companies have to upgrade?
Yeah, you touch a very good point. What are the requirements for AI skills? Yes, of course you can use ChatGPT everywhere or Copilot and these things. But when you are talking about discovering drugs or optimizing dissolution or formulation and taking drugs to patients or selecting people for clinical trials, you need the skills. So you need to hire people. That is costly. And then you need data. And even though there is evolution on that, and sometimes we use digital twins, so we don't need as much data, but the data is an asset. It's becoming very, very important. Also, I was listening to some other podcast referring to the fact that perhaps big pharma is the place to be today, because they do have data accumulating from many years, and they have massive amount of data. So then you wonder about if they're getting a competitive edge versus other startups or biotechs that might not have access to this data, and that is certainly happening. And we're looking at also this aspect because we believe that the biotechs and a startup could join forces and cluster in a way that they also can compete with the massive amount of data that big pharma has. We're thinking in different ways of working, like a federated models where they don't have to share the IP, the data, the raw data itself, but perhaps share, control knowledge or insights about that data. And that seems one of the potential ways to go for not as big companies and to be competitive in the race to go to market.
Right. Does that generate some fear in companies? They think, well, if we're just starting up now, we're kind of late to the game and we can't compete because we don't have the data?
I do very much believe so. It is scary. It is scary for me as well when I think that are we actually realizing what's happening and the speed. So when I'm preparing articles or I write about the strategy, I realize that anything that's older than few months is obsolete. When has it ever happened to me this ever before? So the rhythm that we're going is so fast that if we don't realize what was happening, we've lost the train. We missed the train, really. And access to data still remaining a big question for me, how to access the data. I do believe that is a matter of collaboration. Find the right partners, and then we all bring our skills into the party.
From your own company's perspective, how do you ensure that the the data are relevant and consistent, and that there's integrity to the data and that's anonymous?
Yes, we design our systems with Alcoa Plus principles in mind. So we realize that good manufacturing practices happen in manufacturing, but data integrity is important from early on in the process, because it might be an investigation, because maybe we have to track it down. It is important that by design, the solutions that we are offering have data integrity and Alcoa Plus in mind, and that we follow these across. So we do have permissions, the data gets segregated, it's safe, secure, it cannot be accessed unless you have permission. And this data can be neutralized, standardized, so then the user can reutilize it and they don't need the original software that created the data to be able to interpret and to be able to work with it.
I'm not sure whether this is already the case or whether it could potentially be the case, but is there a danger at all of data becoming a commodity that people are looking to commercialize and make money from, because everybody talks about how important the data are? Like, are we getting to a stage where people are going to be selling data to the highest bidder, and we create a system whereby only the biggest companies can afford to purchase data?
Certainly, it's not something that's happening now, but already happened several years ago with collecting data. Collecting data, you would go underground, your data will be collected, you will fill form, your data will be collected, and then there were issues, and GDPR came in strong. It depends on the countries more than in others to have regulation on privacy, especially. That is in all sectors, right? But more in life science, what happens behind the walls of pharmaceutical industry, it's pretty in their business, in the sense that they have it very, very well protected. So that is their assets nowadays and their competitive edge. And then for the rest of us, really, then there is this partnership. There is this also working with academics that perhaps they have the data more accessible, and maybe the academics can benefit from some partnerships. And I do believe that we will find the balance, but certainly it is a worrying that without data, you go nowhere.
And because it is evolving so quickly, how do you, as a company, stay ahead in all of those areas of AI? Because there's not just the AI itself, there's clinical trials, there's ethics, sustainability, regulations. It's a huge area.
We use AI. No, that's just a joke. No, it's very, it is a constant, that's a constant balance on. We keep very close to our users and our key opinion leaders. So there is a combination of visits, staying in touch, listening, but also embed yourself with information and ask and search. And sometimes we need also external help to keep up with the information that we need to have nowadays. Yes, it's a challenge.
The number of companies as well that are offering AI services seems to be growing. How do you differentiate yourselves from others, other than, I guess, you've got a lot of experience, but how do pharma companies know who to turn to, I guess?
We don't claim being experts in AI algorithms and providing the AI ourselves. So it's the step prior to that on helping the users get ready for humans interpreting the data, or AI, or robots, or whoever needs to have this data. So our main mission is to make this data available in a format that you can really extract the use out of it. So it's more the pre-ready. And what differentiates us from other companies, really, it is this combination of skills that we have, that it's not all about the data strategy, but also the lab strategy and how we go from the lab to the cloud. There is several layers, very important layers in between, but also that single point of contact. So for companies that they come to us and say, hey, yeah, I need a single point of contact. I need to buy instruments, software, digitalization, automation, robotics. Then if they want, we can offer single point of contact for support, for sales, and so on and so forth. If they just want modules and parts of it, that's also fine. So we can go as small or as big as very adapted to our users' needs, really.
All right. Well, it seems like you can help with every step of this journey for companies. So that must be very useful for them to be able to call on you and you can just help them. Because I guess in a lot of cases, they won't even know necessarily what the question is. They just kind of want information on how to deal with this pathway.
I really like this point. You're right, it becomes a consultancy exercise and a change. So sometimes we have calls where the call is an exchange of information and the user does not know what they want. They are explaining to you that they have some gaps or some problems or a vision perhaps, and we have an exchange on peer to peer, scientist to scientist. So yes, it is, for me, it is great to be that peer. I go sometimes to the former company I used to work, and it's like, oh, haven't you met Anna before? She's part of the family. I feel so proud that they see me as part of the community and not somebody who comes and tries to sell you things that, as I said, if I buy this really nice dress that I'm never going to wear, it is important that we make the most of the things that we buy. Yes. We want our customers to be happy.
Do you have any success stories of some of the things that you've done? And again, not ones that you're not allowed to tell me about because of confidentiality or whatever, but what kind of things have you been able to achieve so far?
Fortunately, we have successes that's been published and that we can share. We've helped one of the top pharmaceutical companies in measuring their chromatography system and being able to do system suitability tests so that we know the performance of the instrumentation and we can compare different instruments side by side. We can predict when they're going to fail, but also we can manage the fleet. So we're able to see which ones perform better, what samples go to which one. So that can also save time and money in the long term. That's one example. Continuing with the chromatography, which it is a very important technique, being able to separate compounds in industry. We've also demonstrated recently in a paper that was published by GSK and Merck, driven by the Pistoia Alliances, that the two companies, Merck and GSK, managed to transfer methods from the US to the UK, from one company to the other, and the chromatography systems were different vendors, different softwares, and the method was successfully transferred, making this a very good proof that we can speed up also transferability, not within also big pharmas, but also to their CXO network, CDMOs, CROs. And we are also very happy to be able to deal with legacy systems, because also is a point that we haven't discussed so far, that the fact that it's all very new, right? But what do we do with existing? We cannot all of a sudden get rid of all our instruments that are in the past or our laboratory systems. So what we also do is being able to ingest data from ELNs, and during M&A situations where you acquire an ELN from other companies, being able to reuse and make this data accessible, either consolidating or archiving, and preserve the data according to the retention rules. And then finally, we're very pleased to say that we are today able to ingest 1 terabyte of data per hour, and we've been demonstrating this across 5,000 instruments in another top company, and without downtime. So that is also very pleasing.
I learned a lot from Anna, and not only learned a lot, but laughed a lot too. I cut all of that out. The last thing you need is to hear me laughing, but Anna really knows her stuff, and SciY is definitely making a difference, helping companies navigate what can be quite a challenging time with the introduction of AI, handling data, and negotiating a rapidly evolving field where sometimes you feel like there are more questions than answers, and SciY definitely has the answers. So that's it for another podcast. It's a holiday on Monday in England, but not here in Scotland, which seems unfair, but I'll be working anyway, so I guess it really doesn't matter too much. If you have questions or comments, suggestions for guests, or want to sponsor one or more podcasts, please do get in touch, and you can do so at jim@deeptechdigest.com. Lots of potential interview requests last week, so thank you for that. So until next week, wherever in the world you are, I hope you have a great week. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next week for another Base to Base Biotech podcast. The Base to Base Biotech podcast is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.